what are we doing in the black community? The number one consumer of a Mercedes-Benz
is us.
Us. The number one consumer of a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton, us. And they don't even advertise. Why is it that in the black community, we are always the number one consumer, but we're not the number one creators?
So you just said it, the fact that there's consumers and creators. For so long, we assume success based on consumption.
Welcome to Closing the Gap Podcast, The Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And you are tuned in once again on your radio dial at WATV 94.9. And also, you find us on YouTube at Closing the Gap, The Truth, Closing the Gap, The Truth on YouTube. Then also, you can find us on anywhere that you stream your podcast, whether that's Spotify or Apple or any other means that you stream. Look us up, Closing the Gap Podcast. We strive to give you the truth about black wealth. We're here once again this week, Ms. Hamilton. Always appreciate the opportunity to come and do this work with you. And we have been receiving a lot of different phone calls, text messages, from some of our listeners and engagement on social media sites. And we want to first of all tell everybody that's been tuning in and referring others to it, we want to tell you thank you. We appreciate you, and continue to like, share, and subscribe, and let somebody know if you've learned something good. Also, we want you to also set your appointment to get an advisement with Mr. Hamilton. We've been talking about this over and over and over, and so we want to continue to reiterate that we want you to have success. And even if you don't come here to Hamilton Wealth Advisors, we want you to find somebody that you can trust to help you manage your finances and the resources that God has blessed you with, right? Because we all need to be good stewards with what we have.
Yes, sir.
Right? Good managers with the things we have, with the talents that we have, whether that's physical, whether that's financial, whether that's spiritual, whatever it is, we understand and want you to know that what you have, God has blessed you with it, and you need to bless God with it. And so, first of all, we want you to pray, have a conversation with God, have a little talk with him, and to get the understanding of where you need to go and what you need to do, because that's how you're going to receive your guidance. And so, in today's show, we want to talk about what happens before the plan. We want to talk about solutions. We are a solution-oriented podcast. That's why we talk about the truth about black wealth, right? We want to give solutions. We're not just calling out the problem without trying to find a solution for the problem. So we want you to be solution-oriented as well. And today, we want to talk about what goes on before the plan. You know, we were talking before the show, man, about the businesses, your business and mine, and how we got into doing what we're doing. And we've been telling everybody else what they need to do in accordance to a plan. But share with the people your thought process about the title of this show, What Happens Before the Plan. What do you want them to have an understanding of that they need to do?
Yeah, I would really say that, it's ironic that the same things that, we need to do with our individual finances are the same things that actually come up in our day-to-day lives and with my business and just so happened with your business, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other business owners is, we all, want to formulate a plan of success and be able to take action and know exactly what to do, when to do, and how to do. But the most difficult part actually happens prior to the planning. It's the education. Where do I go to get the education? And then actually trusting the education that I'm receiving to go and actually implement it and utilize it. So, that's probably the most important part. I tell people on a day-to-day basis when I meet with clients, obviously, the first thing you have to do is gain trust. And then, of course, then we can educate you once you trust me, because I can't educate you if you don't trust me. If you don't trust the information that you're receiving, there's no way you'll ever be educated by the information, because you're always going to be skeptical. So you're always going to be seeking and listening and yearning for more information. And you got to find a way to be able to verify that information so you can receive that education. And now you can trust what you're receiving. And then now you actually can move forward into implementation. I think that's where we struggle a lot of times as a community in a lot of different areas. I think we struggle there in our finances, which is why I think a lot of our community does not seek out professional help from a financial advisor. We don't know what a financial advisor does. A lot of times we don't trust the financial advisor. We don't trust where the information and how do we vet that information. So because of that lack of trust, that causes us to, in a lot of ways, have a lack of knowledge and a lack of a proper education on being able to, gain the right information to be able to better ourselves. So, I would say, we always talk about, closing the gap and what will actually help close the gap. And, the number one word always comes back up is trust. I got to trust you. You got to trust me. We got to trust each other, and then we can build together, and then we can grow. Because if I trust you, now we can sit down and we can converse. We can have conversations. You can tell me about your business. I can tell you about mine. And now I can hopefully educate you, and now you educate me. I may be picking up some nuggets like, you know what? I'm in this phase of my business, and I see you just actually came out of that phase, and I can get a nugget from you to help implement it to myself. Now we're starting to do what? Create a actually solution to the problem. That's where the solutions oriented, nature of the show comes in. Like, we're not just, don't speak about it, be about it. So we can speak from experience from a standpoint of being business owners and having our own individual financial plans, but being able to really kind of, put that into action and having a number of conversations and, having that level of trust and, you trusting me and me trusting you, is what led us to this podcast. There had to be a level of trust, within each other. I had to trust who you were as a man, as a barber, as a father, as a pastor. So, there was a level of trust that I had. I had to trust you the first day I met you 20 plus years ago to sit down in that barber shop. I had to trust that you was going to take care of me and make me look good when I got out of the chair. So there's always a level of trust that needs to be had. We just have to do a better job of giving people the opportunity, to earn our trust, and then understanding that it's okay to actually vet that information. It's why we do what we do from an educational standpoint, is why we say we want to provide you solutions, not just a bunch of questions. Is because a lot of places just throw out a bunch of questions and they don't give you any direction and give you any solutions to those particular problems and those particular issues. They're just talking about it. And when you just talk about things and don't provide any direction, it creates more problems than answers. So now a person leaves you and they go to someone else raising another question. And that person is raising another question. So if everybody has questions and everybody's questioning each other, there's no way we can ever actually have any trust to start actually communicate, because there's no real dialogue and communication without trust. I'm only hearing you. I'm not listening to you. But when you trust the pastor that's preaching on Sunday and you take in that message a little bit differently versus you just sitting there and you just kind of hearing him. When you're listening, it gets into your spirit, into your soul. When you hear it, it's going in one ear and out the other. So we want to make sure that we're listening to those messages, because then we can be educated. Now I can grab that nugget. I can hear God speak to me because I'm being educated in a way. And God will tell you what nuggets to pull out of that message as you're being educated. And even there'll be nuggets that we pull out. And I guarantee everybody that's listening to us on the radio show and on the podcast right now, I guarantee we've all heard something in our life when we were listening and it stuck with us. We didn't quite know why it stuck with us, but it stuck with us. And later on in life, it came back and like, oh, you know what? I know why that message stuck with me, because that was God's voice in my ear, giving me a nugget to say, hang on to this, because I'm going to provide you with something else down the road that you can grab a hold to and that you can move forward with. So, that education and trust is paramount, and we need to continue to seek that more and more on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. That's excellent. As you were speaking about that, what also comes to mind with getting the education is knowing that you need to know more than what you think you know. Okay. Sometimes we get caught in the trap of feeling that, okay, I've gained enough knowledge now. And because I've had some success with what I already know, then I'm going to just lean in at that point and not constantly educate myself.
Absolutely.
In every facet of life, there's a thing called continuing education. There's always workshops and various things that are given and provided for people to continue to learn in whatever field that they are in. In financial management and wealth advisement, in being a pastor and preacher, in barbering. There are constantly seminars and learning opportunities to stay abreast on the new things that are happening in the industry that you're in.
Absolutely.
Right. And I know with preaching, it may seem as though, well, there shouldn't be anything new. You know what I'm saying? The Bible is the Bible. But what happens is, as the world changes, the way that you have to address the world becomes different. And so the way that you do church is different. The word of God does not change. It is the same word that stands forever. Jesus is the same. And the way to salvation is the same. It's much like same thing when it comes to managing our finances. The basic principles are the same, but the way that we express them to you all sometimes changes, right? Because there are new laws that are put in place when it comes to finances. The IRS changes their rules and their guidelines, and various things change within the industry, but at the foundation, at the root, they stay the same. But we have to be abreast of what is changing. And so we have to trust the basis of our knowledge that we bring to you in order for us to continue become educated. And we want to impress upon you all to continue to educate yourself and gain more knowledge and wisdom in what you're doing. Scripture, the Bible, Ecclesiastes is a book that talks all about wisdom. God, when God created the heavens and the earth in the very beginning, Scripture tells us that wisdom was present. And why is that? Well, because even God needed wisdom in order to create the world and the way that it is structured. God didn't just come and do that just by happenstance, but God used wisdom. And so we want to impress upon you today to use wisdom in every single thing that you do. That's the only way that you can solve an issue, is to take the time to be wise about it, not make an emotional decision. And too many times, Wilwood, I know you've seen it all too many times, that when somebody is dealing with finances, they want to make a emotional decision.
Absolutely.
When it comes to their finances, something has happened in their lives that has changed, and that has their mind and their heart in a different place. And before they, make the decision, they want to just make the decision rather based on the emotional aspect that has happened in their lives.
Which is always the worst thing to do.
Correct. And so you want to take the time, think about it for a moment. There's a rule, I forgot who came up with it, the 72-hour rule. That said, like before you make a purchase or make a life-changing decision, you want to give yourself 72 hours. Because by that time, psychologically, the thought process is that you would have calmed down, been able to engage wisdom, and be able to make a truly educated decision. Not necessarily rational decision, because sometimes what's rational is based off your emotion.
Absolutely.
But what we're talking about today is what happens before the plan, so that you can be solution oriented, is you must first gain the proper education to move forward. Right. And so in order to utilize that education, you have to trust where it comes from. You have to trust the source.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, what's crazy, and it's ironic, while you were saying that, I thought about, some words that came to mind that always evolve. And, we talk about getting that education, but with education and new experiences creates a different interpretation. See, a lot of times we have a certain understanding based on what we've experienced in our own lives. And as we experience more, the education may be the same, but the interpretation of that education is what changes. I can read the same scriptures now that I read 10, 15, 20 years ago, but the way I interpret those scriptures now, based on my experiences in life, are now different. So it's created an entirely different education from the same message, which is, I tell people all the time, when you got a question or you got a problem, you got one book you can always turn to, and it'll provide the solution to that problem. They say, well, I read the Bible before. I said, but you haven't read it at this particular point in time, this stage in life with your new level of experiences. You go back into that book now, I promise you, you're going to pull out some things that you didn't see before, because God is going to reveal some things to you that you could not see before because it wasn't time for you to receive it yet. So me having a level of understanding, saying, look, the greater I go in business, there has to be a reevaluation of the plan at all times. And we talk about the planning process and what happens before the plan, during the plan, and after the plan, but there's always an evolution to the plan. But we had to create a foundation, and the foundation was sitting down and speaking with a professional. And I myself sitting down and speaking with a professional. I sit down and I've spoke with multiple accountants and CPAs, multiple tax strategists and planners, multiple business development people. And then I start to take my own information and what I understand and start to implement that into my business plan. And I've learned that along the way, I've had to go back and revisit my own plan and do an evaluation and make some adjustments, because guess what? My experiences are now different based on where I'm at in life and where I'm trying to go. So it doesn't always mean that you're doing something wrong because we're saying it's time to reevaluate. It's just sometimes we've all heard the term new level, new devil. The higher you go, the more you got to grow. So we always got to go back to the source and make sure that we're staying in that word to receive that information, because God will always point you in the right direction. He'll always bring exactly what you need when you need it. He'll take away what he don't want you to have, and he'll bring back something new that's meant for you to go to a different place. You know, we've all heard the term that everybody that come with you ain't meant to stay and go forward with you.
Yeah.
Everybody that come ain't meant to go. You know, I have a my own personal saying, if I ain't growing, I'm going. And if I'm not growing through our interaction and our communication, I'm sorry, I have no love lost, but I'm moving forward. And I know and trust that God will bring a new relationship to me that's meant to help me in this new season that I am in my life. So we got to understand, and it's nothing wrong, but sometimes the listening audience got to understand, sometimes you got to leave people where they at. You have to leave maybe the so-called professionals you've been working with before. You got to move forward from them, and it's nothing against them, but you got to hope that they get what they need to maybe develop, and maybe y'all can meet again in the future. But don't stop your development because you don't have the right people around you that can help to mature you and grow you the right kind of way. So we always got to be making sure that we're doing an evaluation of ourselves and also our environment, because good seed can't grow in bad ground. You know, I used to always wonder, like, man, why, Lord, why, you know, what's taking so long? I want to take off. I'm ready to take my business to the next level, but I wasn't always planting good seed in good ground. He said, look, it ain't time for you to grow yet. I got to wait until you get around the right people, which is that good ground. And now some other people are watering that ground for you. Some other people are fertilizing that ground for you. Now you can grow. Now I can grow bigger and better than ever before, because I'm not the only person watering the ground around me.
Right.
You should have professionals that you're working with that are helping to water your ground. So me as a professional, if I'm trusting the CPA and I'm trusting the attorney and I'm trusting all these other professionals that help me to grow my business, with doing so, that's automatically going to put me in a situation where I'm going to benefit based on the affiliation that I have. You know, we all hear this word that it ain't always what you know, but who you know. But if you ain't talking to them professionals, you're not talking to people who are trying to be experts in their craft and be the best at whatever it is they're doing, how can you expect to grow and get to where you want to be? You know, like I always say, you know, you can't soar with eagles pecking on the ground with buzzards. You know, you got to get up and you got to go. You know, you got to take that leap of faith. You got to take that step. So, you know, understanding that, you know, before the plan happens, we got to educate ourselves. And we hopefully got to dive into, you know, finding some lasting, trusting relationships. And it's okay to challenge each other. It's okay. You know, I tell people, there's nothing wrong with confrontation. I think all too often, you know, we've shied away from confrontation in our community in a certain way. And a lot of times our kids nowadays don't understand how to handle confrontation. There's nothing wrong with being confrontational. Being confrontational doesn't mean a physical altercation. I think a lot of times now we hear that person is confrontational and we take it as such, well, they're in your face, they're disrespectful. No. I can peacefully confront you about something and we can have a constructive conversation and dialogue. And now hopefully I can provide a different viewpoint to you. And guess what? You can do the same for me. And now we can continue to have a open relationship and communication, and that way we both can grow and develop together. We'll be right back here in a minute.
Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth, where I'm your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And you are tuned in to WATV 94.9 on your FM dial and also on YouTube at Closing the Gap, The Truth, and anywhere else that you stream your podcast, whether that's Spotify or Apple Music and iTunes. You can find Closing the Gap, The Truth About Closing the Gap Podcast, The Truth About Black Wealth. And what we're just talking about is trust thing, the solution oriented, and being able to utilize the knowledge that we receive and being able to gain things. And one of the main things I want to circle on, man, is when it comes to financial literacy, we have to be careful of where we get our information and what we are consuming.
Yes.
There's a saying, you are what you eat. And, you become what you are around. You were just talking about you can't fly with eagles when you're pecking around on the ground with buzzards, right? And too many of us, our finances are in a buzzard situation but we have an eagle desire,
Yes,
but buzzard actions.
absolutely.
And so we want to get everybody to a point where you become solution oriented to solve that problem. Why are you still on the base level, bottom of the ground, when it comes to your financial planning? And one thing that you need to identify is how literate have you become in finances? We come here on this show every Saturday, and you can find us YouTube. You can listen to it at any moment on YouTube, access it whenever you desire. But on the radio show, we're coming to you every Saturday, right? Why? Because we want to give you the information that you need to become financially literate, not for our sake, but for your sake. Because we know that if you are more literate in your finances and that you have your faith foundationally rooted in God through Jesus Christ, then you will be a better person for yourself and for the greater community, right? In whatever phase of life that you are in, you will become an asset by how you manage your assets. And so we want you to solve the problem. April is labeled as Financial Literacy Month, but we do it on a daily basis,
Absolutely.
on a weekly basis.
Absolutely.
We believe that you need to pay attention. Now, we know it's set aside as that, and that's good, but we want you to grow. We want you to have a better understanding. So can you talk about during this time when we're talking about being solution oriented, what happens before the plan? What are the types of information that we need to be consuming on a weekly or daily basis?
I would say the best place to go a lot of times is to first have a conversation. The reason why I say having a conversation first is because, too often I see people want to jump into the financial literacy space and we want that information, education, and that's great. But if you go to the wrong place too soon, you can become tainted. You can become misinformed, and we're underrepresented as a community in the financial literacy space. Not a lot of, Black, African American financial pundits, so to speak, that we can turn to on the TV. We've all heard about the Dave Ramseys and the Susie Ormans and all these, the Jim Cramers and these people that you can turn on TV and they're always giving financial advice. Yeah. And I tell people the worst thing that you can do is turn on the TV and take advice from somebody who's never met you before. They're giving advice based on their relationships and who they're paid to endorse. So we have to understand the people that you're watching on TV, a lot of times they're marketing and they're, TV personalities. They're trying to sell books. They're trying to get ratings. They're just trying to provide access to information to hopefully push you a certain direction. Now, these people don't understand that, Dave Ramsey has certain, relationships, business relationships, and things that he's endorsing from a business standpoint. Susie Orman has, endorsers, the people who are paying her to push a certain message and a certain narrative. And we have to understand that, while I agree with some of the information that they provide, if we're talking about basic budgeting, credit, don't overspend, but these are things we all know on our own. We know, don't spend more than you make. Create a budget, be smart with your money, save, pay yourself. We've all heard those things before. So they're giving you those tidbits, but then they'll tell you, well, buy term, invest in difference, whole life is bad, or annuities are bad, or, stocks are bad, or don't do this. Anyone that's giving you direct advice without ever having a conversation to you, in no way, shape, form, or fashion, are they thinking about you? Because until you have a conversation that someone does a deep dive into your personal financial history and where you're trying to go and your goals, dreams, and objectives, there's no way they can give you specifics. Now, we can't give you general overall information, but unfortunately, all too often, we hear things, and based on who it's coming from, we take it as the gospel. And now we're trying to incorporate something into our lives, not even knowing if that message was even meant to us or for us. I hear the buy term, invest the difference is one that bothers me a lot because it's prolific in our community. And that message was built for the 40-year-old CEO that's of a complexion not of ours. Because that's a person that comes out of college because of their relationships. They don't start off with the job in the mailroom. They start off as, junior vice president, making $125,000 a year, not the $35,000 that most of us come out of college, with. They start off right at the 125, 150. So guess what they started doing immediately? They started to maxing out their 401ks. They start saving and investing right off the bat from 30 to 35. But guess what else has happened that we didn't see?
What's that?
They have an inheritance. They have a family that has blessed them with, trusts and endowments and gifts and homes. When they get married, they're walking into a situation debt-free. Not very often are we walking into situations and joining in unions completely debt-free. Now, we need to create more of those within our community, but when that person comes out and their grandparents have already paid for their kids' college education, now they can solely focus on investing for themselves. So for that young CEO, he starts maxing out at 40 years of age. Guess what? He can buy that term policy and he's purely investing the difference. And if he does that for the next 20, 25 years, retires at 65, well, he's been maxing out a 401k now for 30, 35 years. He's been saving into an investment account now for 30, 35 years. That money's been compounding. It's been growing. So at that point in time, he's worth $5+ million. At that point in time, does he need the term insurance policy anymore that he purchased when he was 30 or 35? No,
it doesn't.
It can be a benefit, but it's not a necessity.
Correct.
Because he's done the other things needed to build and invest and grow his net worth. So because he actually has assets and no liabilities, he's in a situation where now the term can go away. So for him, in theory, and in reality, that message has worked out. But unfortunately, we don't live in a theoretical world. We live in reality. Right now, we've seen the market take a step back. So in reality, I meet with people every day that are looking to, Mr. Hamilton, can you help me retire? I want to plan for retirement. And, they're not saying, I do want to leave a little something for my grandkids. And you bought term and invested the difference. Well, really, you bought term because the people telling you to buy term and invest the difference can't even show you how to invest the difference. That's just a flat fact. Most of those people are not even licensed and certified to be able to show you how to invest the difference. They're telling you, hey, baby, come work with me. I can help you. You can sell some insurance too and sell this to your family, your friends, and make some money on the side. So now we got shade tree mechanics as financial literacy coaches out here pushing a narrative that is built by a company that is making money off of a policy that 99% of term policies never pay out. That is factual. That is based on from insurance actuaries. So if these policies are 99% never paying out, but all these policies are being sold and never being utilized in a lot of situations, who's benefiting from this? The most expensive thing you can buy is something you never get anything back from. Now, that doesn't mean whole life is better than term, but we have to understand the utilization and understanding the messenger before we take and run off with the message. So we've ran off with that message And in our community, we've worked for 30, 35 years. We didn't save the way we needed to. We haven't put together a financial plan the way we needed to. We bought the term policy. We never went back and reviewed our finances. Now we're 60, 65. Now, by the time we get 60, 65, things have happened and changed in our life. We're not usually in the same health and condition we were at 30, 35.
That's correct.
They know this. Also, the cost of insurance is a whole lot different at 60, 65 versus it would be at 30, 35. So at that particular point in time, they put you in a bind. They say, look, either you're going to pay the ridiculous price for this particular coverage at this particular point in time, or guess what? You can't afford it. So either way, we've won in this situation. Either you're going to pay me more or we're going to give you nothing. Now, along with that, if we haven't invested properly, haven't evaluated, didn't have a financial plan to know how to invest properly, we're in a situation where now those assets that we were hoping to have, we now don't have. But also, we were never in a position the way that other gentlemen in the other community was to be able to max out because our income bucket didn't start off the same as theirs either. We started off at the bottom floor and we worked our way up. So our max capacity, that glass ceiling that we know exists in so many different areas in workforces where we max out at the 100, 150 after 30, 35 years of working. So by the time we get to a point where we can so-called max out our 401k and really save in an abundance, that's maybe the last 5 to 10 years of our working careers, hopefully. They've been doing it for 30, 35. But then there's a thing called the market that plays a factor in all of this as well. So guess what? We have a 2008-like crash. We had a COVID crash. We're dealing right now with a lot of market uncertainty in the market being down over 10+%, probably on its way to having a 25 to 30% correction this year alone. So if that happens and all of a sudden I had worked and I did all this saving, and now I had $1 million in a 401k that I saved and I bought term investor difference, and now all of a sudden I have a 2008 crash and I lose 50% of it, and now I'm at 500,000. That means my retirement future just got cut in half.
Wow.
But guess what? There's no time for it to come back. So in theory, I bought term and invested the difference. But in reality, not understanding, evaluating, and having a plan and doing my due diligence to constantly review that plan, having a professional to work with. So this is why it's important to understand who you're getting your messaging from, because if you're not working with a seasoned professional that has made this their career, not just an opportunity to make extra money on the side, then guess what? When you need help, is the help going to be there? So why are you going to talk with someone if you can't go to the office and sit down and have a conversation? If they don't have a contingency plan about who's going to be able to help me if something happens to you. So these are things that we have not thought about that we have to start preparing for. These are things for me as a business owner I have to think about. I deal with a lot of clients that have a lot of money in various ways. One of the questions I continuously always get, Mr. Hamilton, what happens to my money if something happens to you? Which is why I have to have contingency plans, which is why I have to continue to hire and grow and develop. So those people are always in a beneficial situation where they can be good with me and without me. But guess what a plan does?
What is it?
If I've educated you along the way and we got a plan, and God forbid something does happen to me, you can continue to move forward because you got what?
Plan.
So now that's an education that you're receiving when you can continue to move forward without the teacher. So once the teacher has taught you to a certain point, now you have a great understanding of how to continue to move forward, but also something that's happened along the way. Because we've gained trust and you've allowed me to educate you, you know what an educated, trusting professional now looks like if you need to go find another one. So always helping and growing and developing, because at some point in time, we all have to take a step that we're not comfortable taking. We've all been in situations where we've been disappointed. We've all been in situations where things have not gone our way and we've been taken advantage of. Every person in life, I believe, you loved and you hurt. You can think about your relationships. You know, everybody has probably been in a relationship with somebody that, you know what, you probably could have treated that person a little bit better. But maybe at the point in time where you were in your life, you were a little bit selfish. And maybe you had someone that you treated probably a little too well. And they were at a point in time in their life where they didn't respect and trust you just enough. So most people have experienced what it's like on both sides of the fence. That's where you grow to develop. And now you hopefully grow to the point where you're now to enter this thing called marriage. Well, now I know what it's like to hurt. I know what it's like to be hurt. Now I know what not to do in this situation, but now I can go into this trusting that you're going to give me what I'm going to give you. But even in that marriage, much like that financial relationship, there's still constant communication that has to happen. If that communication dissipates in that marriage, all of a sudden questions start to arise. So the conversations have to be had at all times. Having a relationship with an advisor with trusted sources is essential to having consistent growth, because as you develop and you improve yourself financially, new situations are going to arrive, because they say new level, new devil, right? If I got more money, they say more.
No problem.
So guess what? We got to have access to information and not be afraid to continue to push the envelope with seeking out the proper representations for my situation. And that's going to always change and evolve. And it's okay to make adjustments along the way, but we got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. But it all starts with the education and the trust that leads to solutions, because education experience brings up new interpretation.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So look, we're going to pause right there, go to commercial break, and we're going to come back after that. See you shortly. Yeah, Will. So that's excellent, man, on, making sure that we consume the right things, right? Consume the right information, not just listen to anybody or anything that sounds clever to us, but make sure that what we take in is actually good for us.
Absolutely.
That it is custom fit, right? There are some things that you can get off the rack. There are some things that do fit you straight off the rack just based on who you are, but yet and still, sometimes you have to get some alterations.
Absolutely.
And that's where we need to come to a place like Mr. Hamilton and Hamilton Wealth Advisors to make sure that you add the right alterations that fit your life. Don't just consume what you see on TV. Don't just consume what you hear from your friends. Don't just consume what you see on social media. While those things may be true and may be good, we're not disparaging any of those things and saying that they are not true or not good, but those things may not necessarily fit you and your situation. Some may, but the only way that you'll know is if you have properly educated yourself and you have an understanding of what it is that you need and what it is that you are seeking out for you and where you're going, right? As we talked about earlier about where you are now isn't where you were years ago, and where you are now is not necessarily where you're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So you have to take all of that into consideration when we are making out our plans, reviewing our plans, and implementing our plans, is evaluating our rate of growth. How many years has it taken for you to change from one stage in your life to another? And then based on where you are striving to go and what's going on in your life, what is going to change and in how many years is that change going to happen, right? If you have children, what's the age gap between those children? What are the plans for your children? Will they go to college? Will they go and just get a job? What's the plan for their future, right? Because we also have to take that into consideration as well, that affects our finances as well. Also, you have to think about grandchildren, right? I see many people in my age group in the late 40s, 50s that are becoming grandparents if they're not already grandparents. Some are on the verge of becoming great grandparents and when they get in the late 50s and 60s. And you have to think about that too. How well of a lifestyle do you want to have, not only for yourself, but then also for the grandkids and the great grandkids? How much time do you want to spend with them? How many different things do you want them to be involved in? Not only does it take time, but it also takes money for these children to be able to do the various things that you want them to do. Also, when it comes to sports, right? Sports is an investment now. Now there are you can get returns on those investments, but I see many parent and grandparent that wants their child to succeed in sports, wants their child to succeed in education. And so it takes an investment from us as parents. I know firsthand, we were talking earlier, you were talking about how with your sons being in these basketball tournaments all weekend, you know, and when I look on my social media pages from various friends, I see them out with their children at various sporting events for the weekend, right? All weekend, you know, at AAU camp, volleyball, soccer, baseball, basketball, football, training session. All of these things cost. And so we have to take all of these things into consideration for the plans that we want to lay out for our lives and where you want to be financially when you go into those things. What type of insurance do you need to lay out there and whatever goes on? Go ahead.
Well, you know, I would say definitely, you know, I'm gonna chime in. I'm gonna be a little transparent right here.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to give it to him, like I say, you know, straight talk, no chaser right now.
Mm-hmm.
We got to be honest with ourselves about our kids. If you were no athlete, the chance of your child being an athlete is probably slim than that. You know, gifts and curses are passed on from your father and your mother. So if you and your spouse were not athletes, more than likely, if you didn't play basketball, football at a high level, the chances of your child inheriting a rare ability or talent that's going to pay off and take them to the next level is probably going to be slim to none. If you 5-0 and your wife 5-0, your son is probably not going to be 6'4". If he is, you got to find, you might want to go get a test somewhere, and you might want to check the milkman, as they say, as the old folks will say, you know, if the milkman come by the house when you leave, you might want to do an evaluation on that. But realistically, more than likely, your child is not going to be an athlete. I don't have a problem putting my son in certain things because I grew up, I had a chance to play college football on scholarship, and, you know, my brother plays football on scholarship. My father played football on scholarship. You know, my father-in-law played, football on scholarship. So there's something in our DNA, in our genetics that says he's probably going to be and have a chance to be an athlete. My son is 10 years old and wears a size 12 shoe. You know, he's, 5'6" and 130 pounds right now as a 10-year-old. So based on his current trajectory, there's a good likelihood he may have the size to be able to participate in, sports past grade school, middle school, and high school. Now, what I want us to start doing is being honest and saying, look, if your child doesn't have those particular traits, if he's not an elite standout type kid, we need to start putting these kids in some trades. They need to go to coding, learn how to code and go to code school. We need to learn how to be plumbers and electricians. They need to start doing some internships with attorneys and doctors and dentists and start to take on a different skill set because everybody is not going to go pro as an athlete. I know that firsthand. I had dreams of doing it and it fell short. But thankfully I had an opportunity to get an education and I took advantage of the education that was presented for me. So when I had, to make a pivot, all of a sudden I could fall on my feet and not on my face. But if I wouldn't have had that education, it would have been a lot more difficult for me and I would have probably have had to take a different direction and course in my life. So I just want the parents to understand because I see way too many parents with kids in basketball tournaments on Saturdays and Sundays that ain't got no business in that basketball tournament spending, $600 for a uniform and a package to be on the team and paying for travel and hotels. And, it easily gets up to being, $500 to $1,000 a weekend. And these kids are playing almost every other weekend nowadays. So I just want people to be honest with themselves. And, I'm not here to knock anyone's dream.
Right.
And I'm not talking basketball, football, chili, whatever it may be. But it's okay to say, you know what, baby? This ain't for you. Let's go find out what God got for you. Do you need to be taking music lessons? Are you a skilled pianist? Are you a skilled violinist? Are you a skilled, trumpet player? Are you are you a skilled gamer? They pay for those things now.
Correct.
It's okay. We got to start thinking outside the box and not limiting ourselves to only being athletes. And, I struggle with that myself because I come from an athletic background and, so naturally my kids want to do what I did. But at the same time, I want to make sure that they also see what I'm doing now. So I also make sure I bring them to work now. Well, Dad, what do you do? Well, this guy said he gave you some money. So people just give you their money? I said, well, in a way, son, they do. They trust me with their money to do the right thing with it. And I multiply the funds for them and help build financial plans. Oh, Dad, that's pretty cool. I want to do that. Well, that's great. So I think we got to make sure we start teaching our kids and showing them exactly what we do and how we make a living,
Right.
how we pay the mortgage and pay the bills. We have a skilled videographer, photographer, editor that helps us with the podcast. We've had skilled people. I mean, Daz Goodman is amazing,
Yes,
behind the camera.
That's
He does great things with Create Live Works and putting together things. And I see all of his work and I'm saying, man, I want to make sure his kids are seeing what he's doing. I know his kids play sports because guess what? He played sports in college the same way I did. He played basketball. I played football. So naturally, I know his sons want to do what? They want to bounce that ball too.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But we want to use it as a tool and a resource to get to school, to get the education. So if that next life and next career doesn't happen, he has a skill set. So we got to start developing multiple skill sets and understanding that, like LeBron said, they told us to shut up and dribble. I'm more than an athlete. I can do multiple things. So we as parents, I think, have to do a better job of allowing our kids and seeing our kids as more than what we just think that we want them to be.
Right.
A lot of times, we can get caught up in trying to live through our kids. I see too many guys trying to turn their sons into something that they weren't. If you wasn't that guy, the chances of your son being that guy is probably slim to none because they inherited your skill set, your talent, and lack thereof. But there's nothing wrong with that. Spend that time and energy focused on something else. Somebody needs to be SGA president. Somebody needs to be the treasurer. Somebody needs to be working with, the co-op program and doing things to get themselves ahead because everybody got to play a role.
That's correct.
That athlete that goes pro needs an accountant. He needs a business manager. He needs a financial advisor. He needs a physician. He needs a trainer. All of these positions and things are needed, and all of them can lead to great lives and lifestyles. And I think we need to start highlighting that a little bit better in our community and not leave kids in a position where they feel like it's only one way out. And a lot of times I think, and I've been, in that boat myself as a kid, and I was exposed to more. I was blessed to have parents that put me in different things. But I still had wrapped up in my mind, I want to make it out by playing this ball. I want to be on the football field. I want to be on the basketball court. And that's great if that's your passion. But we understand, being grown men and adults, what it takes to actually make those dreams come true. And sometimes you may want the dream to come true, but that dream ain't for you. We got to start identifying, baby, what's for us, and start pointing our kids in. And that's why other communities, I feel like, have outpaced us in certain ways because they are much more honest and direct with their children than we are. I see kids all the time, and I ask their parents, I say, what are your kids going to college and do? Well, I'm just letting them find their way. No, but you paying for them to find their way, right? No. I'm telling you which way to go. We need to start being directors. Your child is just what? A child. They're there to be led. It's your job to lead that child into the direction they need to go until they get to a point where they've educated and grown themselves to a point where they know how to direct themselves.
Yeah.
So, we see communities all the time. Well, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be a dentist. And they have all these professionals in their families. So guess what? When one makes it, that means everybody else is going to make it because they're going to try to do business with the next one. They don't have to go and look for those other professions within their families. They built them and they've created them. They have an architect. They have a contractor. They have the plumber and electricians and, the attorneys. They have everything they need right there at their disposal. And unfortunately, we rarely have everything we need at our disposal. So we're always turning and looking for it. So because we're looking for it, a lot of times we end up finding it in places where those individuals don't necessarily have our best interests at heart. So we start to have those people in our community. There's a greater chance of somebody looking like me wanting the best for me. Right. There's somebody that don't look like me wanting the best for me. And we have to be realistic and honest about that and do those assessments, but it starts young. It starts with what we put in our kids early on. So I try to make it a point to when, I see my sons on the video game sometimes, giving them a little leeway because I understand that, guess what? The way he's growing up is not the same way I grew up. His gifts and talents, I hope to be greater than mine.
That's right.
Because guess what? I inherited mine from my father. But it's my responsibility to take the gifts that my father gave me and improve upon them. So the education that I received that my father didn't get, I'm able to pass on that to my son. So guess what? My sons now get the education that I didn't get. They're able to get and do more and see more than I was able to do. So hopefully take it a step further, which means that they're probably going to be even more well-rounded than I am. So not to be, to be labored a point, but I just want us to understand, and especially our men to understand, it's okay to go a different direction. Everybody is not supposed to be the same thing. Everybody's not going to be a football player. Everybody's not going to be a basketball player. It is quite all right. There's a lot of people making great money, doing other things and making more money for longer periods of time than it does with coming to being an athlete. So don't get caught up in the he said, she said. Find out what God said.
Yeah.
Talk to God and find out, hey, you know what? Ask God, Lord, what do you have for my child? Reveal to me what direction you want me to lead my child in, not what direction I want to go. Because quite often, we've all done it. We hear our own thoughts over God's, even when we hear God speaking to us. Well, I know God said do this, but he also said, maybe if I want you to, no. That was you talking to yourself. That's you being selfish in nature. That's your flesh speaking and wanting to do what feels good to you. So I just want, our listeners and our men, especially our men, to make sure, because we don't have a lack of fathers. Well, we don't have a lack of dads, but I do feel like there's a lack of fathers.
Taking full control, making the right and righteous decisions when it comes to your children.
Absolutely.
Which deals with trust. Number one, trust in God and not in yourself. And because we end up making too many emotional decisions with our finances, which also end up leading to emotional decisions within our household.
Absolutely.
Not based on true facts and the foundation of what really needs to be going on in our home.
Yes.
But it's off of what we hope and what we desire, but we don't take the time to truly educate ourselves, trust God, but then educate ourselves in the word of God and in the foundation of what is it, as you just said, God, what is it that you would desire for me to do in this situation? How do you want me to lead my family, my children? What is it that you desire for them to do? Because we take it into our account for ourselves to think that we made the child.
Yes.
But not understanding that no matter what you do, if God doesn't allow the seed to grow, then there won't be any children. No matter how hard you try, you can't have a child unless God allows it to happen. Yes. And so if God allowed it to happen, then you need to make sure that you dedicate that child back to God so that God can direct and lead that child in the way that that child needs to go. And sports are good. You get paid off of those things, but it's not the end all be all. I like what you said there. There are many aspects to life that we have to make sure that we are involved in. Yes. We need everybody in certain spaces, and many of part of the issue within our community and the failure that we have is we have too many people trying to saturate one aspect of life.
Yes.
And now we are not spread out in the places that we need to be because you're not doing what you need to do. And I'm not doing what I need to do, and therefore there's a deficit in the community.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying you or me in particular, right? But I'm saying for our audience, that is an evaluation that you need to look at. And that's what we're talking about is what happens before the plan. Because we can put a plan in place for us to execute. And then because we put the plan in place, then we're going to try to force feed and make that plan be successful. But we didn't actually do what we needed to do before we even laid the plan out. And then we wonder why the plan is not succeeding like we want it to succeed. Well, it's because that's not the plan for you. Yes. That's not what you are supposed to be doing. And so that's why we're coming on here today and trying to solve the issue and become solution oriented. Number one, you need to go back, have a little talk with God to consider and say, God, is this the plan that you have for me? Right. And a lot of times God will, most times, almost all the time, if you are patient and quiet and listen and don't do a whole lot of talking, God will definitely tell you whether you are in the right or the wrong.
Yes.
And the thing about God that I love about him is God doesn't ever want you to fail.
Mm-hmm.
That even if your plan is failing, and if you go talk to God about the fact that the plan is not succeeding, God will instantly give you the adjustments that you need to make to put forth a plan that will succeed. God ain't gonna wait around for a long time to do that, right? We just celebrated Resurrection Sunday on this past weekend of April the 20th, Sunday, April 20th. And the thing that I love about the resurrection weekend and the story of Jesus Christ dying on the cross and being rising up from the grave, right? He got up out of that grave, is that while there are some situations in your life and plans that seem like they are dying, or not only do they seem like they are dying, but they are actually dead. Those plans are dead. If you go ahead and bury those plans, let them die. Stop trying to keep them alive. Put them on child support. Life support, not child support. Putting that plan on life support, trying to keep it alive, and it's not working. It's draining all of your funds. It's draining your energy. It's draining your household. It's draining your children. It's draining your family. It's draining anything that you touch. Go ahead, let that plan die, bury it, then go and talk to God, and God will give you a new plan to resurrect out of the grave. He'll give you new ideas that you need to set forth and walk in. Why is that? Because God has a desire that above all things that you will prosper and be in good health. But too many times we want the prosperity to be what we want it to be.
Well, all things work together for God. Those that love the Lord, are called according to his purpose. If you remain
in him.
Yeah. And I think that's what we have to remember sometimes. So even if you make a mistake, but you make it putting God first. Because we gonna make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. We understand that you're gonna make mistakes in your financial plan, you're gonna spend too much money. Guess what? Life is gonna happen and cause you to have to turn left when you wanted to turn right. You know, these things are going to happen. But having a plan also shows you when you made a mistake, what you need to do to get back on track. And that's the biggest thing we want people to understand is having that financial plan and not listening to yourself and listening to God. And I think that's where we start at, obviously. You always talked about, just a second ago, well, the failure in the plan was, did you have that conversation with God before you put together your life plan? Did you have the conversation with the financial advisor before you put together your financial plan? If you put together your life plan or your financial plan without talking to God and without talking to the financial advisor, how successful do you think that plan is going to be? Well, you can't put together the best plan without talking to the best people to actually show you how to put together and implement that plan. See, you can't teach yourself.
Right.
All too often, we want to teach ourselves what to do, when to do, and how to do. But all of us had to go to school. All of us had to go somewhere and receive an education in life and an education in finances. And we're here to help you gain both. See you next time.